Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my boy come on this week. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
I'm an insightful teacher, Rakim Jenkins. My friends call me Amalu. I would say that I was a former teacher, but once a teacher, always a teacher. I always tell folks I teach life, just not a content. But if you want to know my content, it was history. I then became a dropout teacher during the pandemic. Things got real hectic real quick, and I just decided to take my talents to South Beach, kind of like Mexico, but not, whatever. And then I became an administrator, department chair of humanities, instructional coach, and then I was assistant principal of culture, which I was fired for wearing a hat. So now I am a full-time consultant. I work for a consulting firm. We support school leaders actually with blended learning strategies in the classroom. I also consult on the side. My favorite is project-based learning, and I speak life into people, into students, into communities. And for me, education was a passport for me to do what I do now. So every day above ground is a privilege for me, and just seeing who I can spark to pass the torch to the future generations. So thank you for having me. Great one.
So at the time of this recording, we just finished MLK Day going live with some wonderful folks.
Yep.
And in that conversation, using your words, you dropped a bar or 20. And you talked about MLK and him talking about being a drum major.
Yep.
Remixed it and said, are you a drum major for liberation, or are you dancing to the beat of white supremacy?
Yeah.
So I think about that, and in light of the discussion we're having today, is we exist in a system that, specifically with education, that is dead set on our compliance versus any type of liberatory act or will or desire. And so the beat is always playing, going back to your quote.
It's true.
It's like the song that's playing when you walk into the grocery store, right? And it gives you, it's just saying, it's playing in the background. Nobody really pays attention to it, but all of a sudden you're in this good mood, and what was $5 in Target now turns into $150. Yeah.
Stop putting stuff in the
You're right. Now you just start putting stuff in your cart. And so there are many people who've come into education. They're listening. They started with a certain beat or rhythm that they wanted to, but before they knew it, they started dancing to a different beat. Talk to me about, I'm going to say, resisting the beat.
Oh, resisting the beat.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a great question. I think for me, it was always it's hard, right? So I think for me, I can just sit up here and say, like, honor yourself, like, to thyself be true, right? But some folks are not built the same. We're not built the same, right? So to really resist a beat that's been beating for 500 years, that brought our ancestors from across the Atlantic Ocean, put us in here, put us in chattel slavery and Jim Crow segregation, like, we're in the history of white supremacy, right? So we're in a white supremacist paradigm. So if that's all you know, then the drum is gonna sound familiar. Right? So, right, I think in order to you have to ask yourself, like, all of us had it, like, something's not right here. I think that's where you start, right? It's like, you doing all the things as a teacher. I was there doing all the things, telling folks they have to walk on straight lines, right? Sit in slant and do all that stuff, right? Hey, watch this. I'm gonna play it out. What's 2 plus 2?
4.
Don't call out. The merit. Respond.
But I was just answering your question.
Automatic detention for your response. That
Come
can't
on,
be right.
man.
Go to the dean's office. It's never okay to talk back to a teacher. Ever.
Yeah.
So now look, and that's the conditioning as me as a teacher and what I'm trained to do and what I'm training kids to do. So you see, I'm thinking it's right. I'm trying to get a 4 on a rubric. So if someone comes to my class and evaluates me and someone calls out in my class, not out of defiance or disobedience or any of that nature, even if they did, is the way you handle it. They're excited about the work. Oh, it is. And instead of saying automatic detention for your response, it's like, oh, it is 4. Excellent job. Great, amazing. All right, so you got 1. Let's give someone else a chance. And if they can't do it, I'm going to come to you next time. Right? Yeah. It's a way and an art to do this thing. But what I'm saying is most of the time we are taught and groomed into a way, I would say at least for Black folks, right? Groomed in a way in which how to act. And we have these ideas of what it means to be a good teacher, right? So for me, I had to, after sending a bunch of folks to the dean's office, I had to make a decision. It was like, yo, the things that they're doing are age appropriate. Like, what am I doing? Like, I had to ask myself, you know what it is? Like, I had to really reflect and really ask myself, was like, I'm teaching in my homeschool neighborhood. I'm teaching kids that look like me. Like, is this right? And then I think about W. Du Bois and his age-old question in Souls of Black Folks. He says, as he went through school, as he grew up through life, the one quintessential question that he came with was, how does it feel to be a problem? I asked myself, when kids are being forced to sit up straight, go to detention, no trips, all these other things, and I'm just saying, well, that's how they want me to teach. And I'm like, no, that can't be right. That's not why I came in this for. And I asked myself, Rakim, how does it feel to be the problem? The same problem that you're trying to fight against. How does it feel to be a problem? So it was a reflective stage. And I said, you know what? It feels terrible. I didn't come here to control Black bodies. I came here to liberate. I came to shine a light. I came to do this work, and this is not a line. So if I'm going to get fired for teaching the truth, teaching the history of African descent, and doing the work, then I'm going to go out. I'm just going to go out because I can't be my ancestors' wildest dream. And if I'm up here killing the dream.
That part. Heavy on that part.
I think it's first reflection. And then once you notice you're doing wrong, or once someone calls you out you're doing wrong, or something like is there your moral, you have to say like, you know what, enough is enough and it's time for a change.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's like the reflection piece first, right? Confucius says there's 3 methods in which you learn wisdom. 1 through experience, right? 2 through imitation, and 3 through reflection, which is the noblest, right? So it takes a deep reflection and being one with yourself. And then it's going to take some tough skin. Because what's going to happen is once you decide that I'm going to be a revolutionary, I'm going to be a liberator, I'm going to inspire Black genius and Black thought and just do what's right by kids, the system is automatically going to try to recorrect itself and put you in your place. Just like systems are created to keep kids in their places, there are systems that schools create to put teachers in their places. Right? So for me, it's a deep sense of reflection, but also like you have to say like, is this why I came for? And if this is why you came, if this is not why you came, then you have to make a decision. So I made a decision back in my second year of teaching, probably like the second year of teaching, that I'm never going to inflict pain or suffering or emotional damage on Black bodies. I don't care who comes in here with the paperclip, with the board or anything. I'm not gonna do it, right? And I've been like that for the last 10 years. So for me, it's a reflection, and for me, it's like really becoming one with yourself to say like, this is not right. And not just saying this is not right, going behind closed doors and talking to the staff members and stuff like that, and not saying something. I was the one that would say, this ain't right. This ain't right. And then whether I told them I'm not doing it or not, I wasn't doing it. So I was that teacher who was like, you know what? I'll just listen. I'll say this is not right. They say, well, this is the standard. And then I'll go and do my own thing. So that's how it started. But it really is going to take some reflection and really like a stand. You have to take a stand. You have to take a stand.
The interesting thing is for folks who are going back to the analogy, resist the beat and whatnot, first have to recognize that the song is playing to begin with.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's a bunch of folks who will say, no, I am a good teacher. My kids are listening. My kids are learning. They're making growth. They're doing these different things. And all of that could be very well true.
Passing the test.
Right? They're passing the test. They seem to be adjusting well. They don't seem like whatever have you. But the question that I think folks have to ask is, what do your students have to give up in order to have access to those things that you're providing? What is it costing them to be a part of the learning and the growth in your classroom?
Yep.
You know, I was having a very real discussion last week on the podcast. I had my friend Sybil on, Sybil Patry, and we were talking about how you work hard to provide a better life for your family. And I have 2 kids, and I'm in a little more blue collar, but it's white majority town. And they have access to things in their classrooms that they wouldn't have had, say, if I've gone to the next town over, literally.
Yep.
However, it is costing my kids something. I have to teach my kids by proxy to be proud of their Blackness, while still teaching them how to edit themselves in such a way that they don't be perceived as a threat. And so there's this dual, I'm going to say citizenship that I have to give them a passport to. They have to be on this side. Yes, we're absolutely Black, beautiful. We're absolutely affirming all that you are. We absolutely are. And I want you to be proud of it. But on this side, understand that folks are going to perceive you this way. And so this is how you navigate it. And so I have to, that dual citizenship costs something.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many people in their classrooms, whether they know it or not, are the person that is checking for the passport before they come into the class to put the stamp on it. You got to be able to do X, Y, and Z in order to provide access to come into my classroom to do this thing. And if you show up differently,
you got to pay for a visa.
You got to pay. Yeah.
You got to pay for entry.
Yeah. Some way or another, this cost is going to be exacted.
Listen, it doesn't matter. You know what it is, though? When I was thinking about that, when you said that, I always say that the kids who are in the schools who are not like, both the kids in the affluent schools who don't talk about their Blackness, but like their SAT score is going to be perfect when they get done and they're going to Ivy League colleges and stuff like that. They know deep down inside they're getting inferior education culturally. Like, it's the microaggressions, it's the down out racism. It's right. The folks in the dilapidated schools who see themselves and all around and things of that nature, don't have the resources, may have like an inferior academic education, right? They know that they get an inferior education too, right? But I always say, to know you're getting an inferior education is one thing. To know at what length you're getting it is another. Like, we know kids are getting an inferior education. We know there are some schools that have inferior teaching, inferior models, different things of that nature. But until you know to what lengths you're getting it is a whole nother thing. Like, during the pandemic, I'm like, yo, those kids at Dalton on the Upper East Side is not dealing what my kids in the South Bronx are dealing with, right? And I started reading articles about how they were getting into college and the Ivy League and how their tuition alone granted them access into schools and things of that nature, I was like, oh my God, this is happening throughout the country. So I knew my kids were getting an inferior education, right? But I didn't know to what lengths. And that's the real thing. When you see at, like, we know it's like, when you see at what lengths this thing is diabolical, it will blow your mind like, wow, this thing is
Mm-hmm.
insidious. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what, like, when you think about like what people are paying into, because those kids at Dalton are paying a passport too. They're just thinking is up front in cash.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's a different type of privilege. To where, right, some folks is paying with their culture, some folks are paying with their academics, some folks are paying, it's a different type of price, but the price of the ticket is way higher in other places. Right? And I'm not talking financially.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you got, you know, when you think about calculating that cost and you think about, what we're faced with in
Mm-hmm.
education, there is also a cost on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
you are going to step up and be revolutionary, if you're going to step up and have that moment, right? And let me jump in here and say this. For me, similar to what you're talking about, we had this conversation many times, but you graduate teacher prep programs and realize you don't know how to really teach. And so
Yeah.
you have to really learn that through on the job training, it seems. So I came into what was voted the poorest, most dangerous city to live in, Camden, New Jersey,
Yeah.
and I was handed a book. And this book was called
Teach like
Teach
a
Like a
white
Champion.
supremacist.
That
Oh,
part.
oh,
That
sorry.
part.
Sorry.
No, no, I was gonna go there. I was gonna go there, but it's fine. That's where we're going. Yeah. So it was these high control, policing of all things black and brown in my classroom.
Yeah.
But because I was told this is the way to do it, this is the way,
This is
I jumped in and I ate it up and I was good at it. And
mm-hmm.
the fact remains that I think I was only that good because my students kind of gave me grace because I look like them,
Yep. Yep.
right? But here I am looking like them, but
Mm-hmm.
exacting the harm of the white teacher next door.
Yep. Being a drum major for white supremacy.
There it is. Dancing to the beat.
I
And
feel
as I continue to see the damage unfold in front of me, see kids respond differently, I started to question myself after a while.
it. Mm-hmm.
As
Yep.
I started to question myself, because here's the thing, there are teachers who will see a student respond a certain way and immediately go to something's wrong with them,
Yep. Yep.
not recognizing that what the student might be doing is similar to what that headache does when you're sick.
Yep.
The headache is there to let you know that there is a deeper issue and you have to do some investigation.
That's it.
And so we got folks who have the quote headache in their classroom but don't recognize that they themselves are the sickness causing the headache.
Come on. That's good. That's good.
And so the introspection, the reflection you're talking about, that process is hard, but it's even more difficult when you start to count the cost of
Yep.
being a revolutionary.
Yep.
So let me ask you, as I'm teeing it up, throwing the oop like Dwayne Wade to LeBron right about now.
Oh,
What is some of the cost that teachers are going to have to pay in order to be revolutionary, in order to push back, in order to resist the beat?
man, this is hard for me, bro. You know why?
Talk to me.
Because everyone's in a different situation,
That
right?
part.
So I can't give you a one size fit all answer,
Hmm.
but I can give you some things, right?
Yep.
I can tell you what I did. The first thing I did was to refuse to teach like a robot. I decided that there was a monotony, right? Because you gotta understand that most folks who come out of these teacher training programs are certified to teach, but not certified to teach. So
Mm.
when you come in a classroom, I may have a certification or I may not have a certification, but I'm not certified to teach these black and brown students. So for me, like you said, there's so much you can get off of cultural competency.
Yeah.
It's only going to take you so far, right? And then they're going to know, that you're not who you say you are, right? You can look the part, but you're not about the part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I did not have a certification to teach because they just throw you in there. However, I had the moral and the North Star of I knew I wanted to do best for Black and brown children, no matter what it took, right? So for me, the first thing I did was I learned the content, right? I was an excellent teacher, a content history teacher. And then I filled in the gaps of the content, right? So I didn't start from slavery, right? I started from the great African civilizations, right? I just took my books and I started from the great African civilizations, right? I was thinking about Blueprint for Black Power, right? I was thinking about John G. Jackson, Civilization. See, all the African books on a higher shelf. Sometimes to get to things, you got to go get to the higher shelf. So I started from thinking about, I started them at Comet. I started them thinking about I started them when my mentor started me, right? He said you're born to win but programmed to fail, right? And part of that programming to win was to equip them with a history of African descent that did not start at slavery.
Yeah.
Right. So then instead of going to the Americas, right, I went to the Mayas, the Incas, and Aztecs for my Latinx folks in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
And I went there, and then I went to the Olmec people, and then I went to the indigenous people, and I always breathed life into history, saying we had a culture, a tradition, you have a culture, tradition, and this is where it comes from. It doesn't come from the slave ship, right? It comes from a great, grandiose of history that it may not look at it around you, but it's in you. It's in your DNA, in your makeup, and you can access this brilliance so I had to start from there, right? The second thing I did was I decided I was not going to solve those punitive behavior interventions. Because I knew if you miss class time, that's missing learning time. I'm not going to reteach you to death. I'm not going to reteach you. There's folks who go to school every day and still not learning. You know why? Because they're in the dean's office. And then they don't like you. And then you say, oh, such and such is never in the class. No, they're never in your class because they go to gym every day. They go to math every day. They may not go to English because you don't speak the language. They're not able to, you don't speak the culture. So they're not going to English. Because all you do is tell them they can't use these 24 words in your class. So they're like, bet, I'm out of here, right? So I think it's one, an academic shift and an insight in terms of how you're going to teach this content. Two, that's culturally responsive. Two, a cultural shift. How are you going to address students when students do age-appropriate things, right? Yeah. Three, you know how they said before, they used to say, don't smile till Christmas or something like that? Because they took the human out of the teaching, right? Because it no longer became about teaching students and kids. It became about teaching standards and tests. Yeah. What I tell kids, teachers, are you a teacher of standards or are you a teacher of students?
That part.
Are you a teacher of tests or are you a teacher of students? Because if you're a teacher of standards and tests, then you're not a teacher. You're not a teacher of students, right? So that's the third shift you got to make is what you came to teach students, right? So I used to start with something as crazy as in 5th grade, ask Mr. Jenkins. And the first amount of class, after the words of inspiration, everything, and the do now, I'll be like, ask Mr. Jenkins. I'll give them 5 minutes to ask me whatever I want. And that was just a simple way to build relationships in the classroom.
Yeah.
So those things you can do inside of your classroom. The third thing you have to do, you have to speak up in the professional development. When they there and they rolling out something, you got to be like, hey, this is not right. But you can do it strategically. You and your 5 friends, you all know this is not right. So you need to go to your 5 friends and say yo, we're all going to say something in this meeting. And let's find some allies who's going to support us in this. That's just simple. Another thing I did was I took a $30,000 pay cut after my 3rd year. Oh, wow. Now, that's not going to work for everybody. right? Probably $30,000 to $40,000, right? That's not going to work for everyone because I was teaching at uncommon schools where white supremacy is all too common, right? And I mean, they might have changed their call. They said they wanted to do some project-based learning, cultural responsive teaching. They on their way. But when I was teaching there, it was all too common. I can't speak for it right now, but due to those pages on Instagram that pop up, it's still common there. So I left that for an innovative charter school, right? Which project-based learning got the sense of restorative justice, things of that nature. But they couldn't offer me as much money as Uncommon. So for me, I could have been like, yo, I'm going to stay at this school right here and try to fight in this system. But I was losing. Losing. Like the opposition was too much. And, right, my first year I was the only black male teacher. So it's me, and I was like, I'm out of here. But by my third year, there was about 12 black men in my school in 3 years that I recruited to come, right? Because I knew if it was more of us, we would make a difference. So I took a $30,000, $40,000 pay cut. Wow. Then I went through the high school. I led a rites of passage. I did all that stuff. But then I felt in my second school, the academic standards wasn't on par. Culture. Kids can't read and write. This ain't right. I can't do it, right? So I just felt like in that situation, it was all about like culture, but students don't have they couldn't read and write. So I wasn't down with that either, right? So for me, I was pushing the academic standards too. And when you're pushing academic standards in the school with low academic standards, the students would get on you and say, you're doing too much. The staff will come to you and say, hey, you're doing too much. And I'm like, I came from a great academic institution. One thing I give them, the academics is on par. Culture sucks. I know what it looks like. Like, my fifth graders would run circles around y'all. So I knew at what level someone should be at what age. So I decided like I was going to push them academically no matter hell or high water. Parents used to come up to me trying to get on me and scream at me and stuff like that. I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't care. And I think it takes that type of thing. When I became an administrator, like when I took an administrative position, the parents are going to come at you. Oh, I don't like the direction of the school. I don't like that stuff. I know y'all like to tussle, but you know, I'm from where Mike Tyson is. And when it comes to tussling, I'm the best to ever do it. So I think it's like reflection, but you got to take stands against parents. You got to take stands about students. You got to take stands against the admin. You got to take stands against the board. Like, you just have to take a stand. Like, in every situation, you have to take a stand. And it might cost you your job. You might not get that promotion. I was in a school that I helped support and build. I've been passed over for leadership 4 times because they did not want someone like me who was going to challenge and question everything on the leadership team.
Right.
Because they want to stay with the status quo. So for me, I took pay cuts, but no kid to this day, if you tell them, even the teacher, even the kids who didn't like me when I was an admin because I was too hard on them, they would say like, oh, I didn't like Jenkins, but you know, he was cool. He always looked out for me. He didn't deserve that. Like, no student will fix their lip and say at the end of the day that I did not do right by them.
Yeah.
And that's all that matters to me. So for me, it's going to take a lot of things. But me, it was the pay cut. I got pay cuts. It was getting into it, being passed up for leadership positions, getting pushed out of schools, going against getting, you know, I never got written up until last year. But I think I got written up once for like coming on social media when they like wiped out my PD and they said I couldn't teach the professional development.
I remember.
So, right, I got written up then. But then, I mean, they took it back. They just try to like get in my way. But it's gonna take thick skin, and it's gonna take dealing with the racist and bias your colleagues, right? Because me, I'm gonna tell you straight up. Like, I'm gonna tell you straight up. Like one teacher said my students did not get the language, a Spanish teacher, because they listen to hip hop music.
That pause is on purpose, y'all.
What? Hip hop? I was like, so why don't you put on some Daddy Yankee then? Some Bad Bunny? Like, what in your mind will tap you into it? But that's the type of things you got to deal with, right? You got to deal with the white woman who you call out or say something, they start crying to the principal and saying that you threatened them. You got to deal with getting negative marks and not getting the raise that you deserve because you decided that the Danielson rubric is meant for Danielson and not Jamal and Jaquana and Brianna. You like those. You gotta say like you gotta start crossing things out the curriculum and rubric. Like you gotta do all of that, and those are all the things I did. But again, like you gotta choose. You gotta what's best for your situation.